So something I realized when I made that Boston vlog, I realized going through my camera, I was thinking to myself, like, I never made a setup video of my current settings for vlogging. So in today's video, I'm gonna be breaking down all my current settings for vlogging using my Sony A7II. Now you guys can use these settings for any camera you guys have, but in this current situation, I do have the Sony A7II. So let's break it down. So the first thing I want to talk about is video resolution, and on this camera I am using 1080p. This is the highest that this camera can go, and if you do have a camera that has 4K or even 8K, then definitely use that. You always want to use your highest video resolution, but depending on your editing software and your computer, it could take a toll if you're getting on those higher video resolutions. So just keep that in mind. And how I feel about 1080p, it's still strong. 4K is really good, but 1080p is standard. You know, something I realized too is I have really sensitive eyes, and I gotta get them checked out because even on cloudy days, I feel like I'm always squinting like this, and it's like, ugh. So that's why I'm wearing these sunglasses. Now the second thing I want to talk about is FPS, and what FPS stands for is frames per second. Now for vlogging, you don't want to have a high frame rate because higher frame rates are more for slow motion. And when you have a higher frame rate, the moment you slow that clip down, it's going to look more smoother in post-production. So on this camera primarily, it does have 60 frames per second and 24 and 30. Now primarily I use 30 frames per second. You can use 24 frames per second, but to me, when you're doing things like this, it looks too blurry and it looks like you're kind of getting like motion sickness. So with 30 frames per second, it's not as distorting looking, it's more smoother. So I want to make sure you guys know about your shutter speed as well. And what that does is if I shoot at a really low shutter speed, and it'll start to look like I'm like flickering, and you don't want that. So you always want to shoot doubled of what your frames per second is, or FPS. So right now I'm shooting at 30 frames per second, and my shutter speed is 1/60. So that way it doesn't look jittery or kind of looks funky when I put it in post-production. So the same rules apply when you're shooting at different frame rates. So let's say you had 24 frames per second, you want to shoot at 1/48, but most cameras don't have 1/48, so you want to shoot at 1/50. You always want to round up. So yeah, 30 to 60, 60 to 120, 120 to 240. You get what I'm saying. Now once my shutter speed is adjusted, I do not change it at all because I never want to make my footage look jittery. So always keep your shutter speed locked. Now the next thing I want to talk about is file formats, and every camera is going to be different, but for this Sony A7II, it has 3. Now the formats that they provide is MP4, AVC HD, and XAVCS. I had to look that up. It's on my phone. But primarily I shoot on XAVCS because I feel like it has more detail and it captures everything that I'm trying to go for. Just looks the best. So when you're vlogging, you always want to have a ISO on automatic. That way you don't have to do much and you're not really worrying about if it's too bright or too dark. The camera's pretty good at telling if it's light or dark outside, so leaving on automatic is not really a stress. So the next thing I want to talk about is ND filters, and ND filters are super important. Do I sound echoey right now? Let me switch this. I should take my own advice because I personally don't have them, and I should, because when you're filming outside in broad daylight, it's basically like sunglasses for your lens, and you're not overexposed to sunlight. So I'd invest in some ND filters, and I'm probably gonna order some on Amazon tonight. Now I could finally take my sunglasses off and not have to squint at the camera. But the next thing I want to talk about is your f-stop. And f-stop is super important when you're vlogging, because when you're vlogging, you don't want to be not in focus because you're trying to focus on yourself talking to the camera. Now I did post my vlogging setup, and I'll link it right here in case you guys want to watch that. But I use a 10 to 18 millimeter lens, and my f-stop on this camera is an f4 to f22. It is kind of on the higher side, but it still gets the job done of doing these vlogs. And typically wide angle lenses keep things more in focus than other lenses. So that's pretty much it for my vlogging settings. If you guys got any value out of this, let me know down in the comments section down below. Or if you just want to say something cool, let me know down in the comments as well. This is Ricky, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace. I'm starting to feel rain, so I gotta get out of here.